90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today we'll be talking about how to make your marriage last. And our guest is a divorce attorney who was a nurse before she became an attorney, Nancy Perpall, and she's going to talk about some of the reasons people get divorced and what a couple can do to prevent that, and perhaps even getting married if that's not the best approach or the best continuance of a relationship. Nancy, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you for having me.
Now, divorce filings, even among some celebrities, are always in the news. Do they have certain commonalities?
Today, very high-powered people, both in politics and celebrities, are not airing their dirty laundry in public. They're trying to keep it far more civil for the benefit of their children.
Is that true for the rest of us? If ordinary people are getting divorced, is it best not to air your dirty laundry in public? Perhaps before someone takes that final step and gets divorced, is it good to get some counseling to see if the marriage can be saved, or even before people get married to see a counselor to make sure everyone's on the same page, has similar expectations?
Absolutely. In fact, you raise a brilliant point, because Brides Magazine just recently published an article endorsing the fact that people, before they become engaged, when they're thinking about getting married, go to prenuptial counseling.
And also, people may assume that the other person wants a certain lifestyle, travel, a home life, a family size, or children, or personal, a certain lifestyle, and the partner may have other expectations.
Absolutely. One of the largest unrealistic expectations is that you're both going to agree about how to spend your money. Finances are a very big factor in divorces, and finances need to be discussed prior to you getting married.
And is the one solution to that everyone pools their money and has a tiny allowance, or assuming there's enough money to go around that people maintain their own separate lifestyle to a degree and pool a certain amount of money?
Premaritally, today, it's important for the engaged couple to disclose what their debts are. The average person comes to a marriage late 20s, early 30s, which is the average age of an American marriage, with at least $30,000 to $40,000 worth of school debt and credit card debt. And unless you know that before you get married, it can be quite a surprise and really it can boil over with anger that you've not disclosed everything.
And also, if one person has a different spending style and, let's say, lives beyond their means, and the other person spends perhaps less than their means and likes to save for a house or for a family or for a trip.
That's exactly right. It's recommended that a couple discuss before they get married the need for an emergency fund, how much are we going to spend on vacations? What are your expectations about buying a house right away? All of those things really lend itself to being flashpoints after the marriage if it's not discussed and disclosed prior to the marriage.
And how much room is there for compromise? Do both people have to be on the same page about everything? Their gifts, lifestyle, furnishings, going out to eat, their hobbies, or is there room for people to do stuff they enjoy as long as there's money for savings and money for common expenses?
Since we all come to relationships with a different past, with a different family of origin, from different neighborhoods and educational backgrounds, you're never going to have two people liking the same thing, having necessarily the same idea or attitude about spending or family vacations or spending time with family on the holidays. what is necessary to keep the marriage going in a healthy direction is to come to some common ground about it.
And what could that common ground look like? That everyone has like an allowance or discretionary funds, or has to get approval from the other for a certain expense above that, or expense that involves both of them?
What it involves is you sitting down and almost doing a money date, both before and after you're married, and discussing those very things. Many people presently, especially millennials, are asking for prenuptial agreements. The the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers recently conducted a survey, and the result was that there's a 51% increase by millennials in asking for prenups for the very reasons you just discussed. Are we going to pool our money? Are we going to have a spending account, one joint account where we pay the mortgage, car insurance, electric, all of the necessities to keep a household going? Now, those are the things that they discuss.
Now, a prenup might also have details on what will happen to the joint property or possessions, or perhaps pre-existing possessions or licenses or pensions if the marriage dissolves. So is it important to have a prenup for those reasons as well?
Absolutely. A prenuptial agreement is triggered upon divorce or death. So in both instances, the prenuptial agreement controls. And a prenuptial agreement will keep the assets that you had prior to coming into the marriage separate, if that's what you've agreed. You could even keep the appreciation in those assets. For example, appreciation in the pension, appreciation in stock options, separate property. But it takes a compromise between the parties to make those decisions.
And you're not entering this agreement with the expectations you're going to get divorced. Just in the event of a divorce, there'll be a prepackaged formula, so there won't be as much fighting, there won't be as much emotional turmoil, and also the legal fees will probably be lower if you've already agreed on a formula and just institute the formula.
That's absolutely correct. And if you don't institute the formula that you think you can live with under the the circumstances of when you're, how you're coming to the marriage, every single state in the United States and territories has laws with a formula to divide the assets, which you may or may not like. For example, in some states, your engagement ring is your separate property. In other states, it may become marital property. Certainly, wedding rings are definitely marital property in some states.
And there also may be gifts that you receive or money you inherit, and you want to make sure it's treated in a way that might protect yourself or retain it as your asset if something should happen to the marriage.
Absolutely. The average age in the United States right now to get married is between 28 and 34. 28 for women, 34 for men. And many times they're coming to the marriage with separate assets. Inheritance, as you said, very often houses. If you don't determine that it's going to be separate property, it could be construed as marital property and divided.
And it's very important. Some people are getting divorced and even remarried in their 30s or 40s. And, this will protect whatever they are bringing into the second marriage. Yes.
It's a very interesting point that you raise. A recent study said that in 1960, 90% of men were married by the age of 30 at least one time. In 2018, a study was done, and 54% of men are married by the age of 30 or have at least one marriage. So it's dropping.
And if marriage is taking place later, there's a chance that one spouse or the other was in a marriage, perhaps a short-term one, before that marriage.
Right. And with second divorces, which have a higher percentage, a 60% chance of getting a divorce, you may have children from that prior marriage, and you want to protect the assets that you got from that marriage so that it goes to the child and doesn't get confused.
And that's why a prenup is even more important.
especially in a sequential marriage. As I said, 60% of second marriages go to divorce, 70% of third marriages.
And what's the reason that a high percentage of second marriages, you would think that people would make better decisions the second time around?
You would think. Unfortunately, there are three components, when you're in a biologically and chemically, very quickly. The first step is the attraction to the other side. And that's when the dopamine in your body is swirling around in your brain and you become very obsessed. The second is the romantic stage, where you're just so focused on this other person. You find them the most special thing in the world. And the third is attachment, which happens after the marriage and while the couple has been living together for a while. And that is the result of a hormone called oxytocin. So when those hormones are not being fed, in other words, novelty in a marriage that's getting boring, any novelty that you can engage in triggers a release of dopamine, which returns you to that love state. So there are many things you can do when you start to feel as if, the fizz in your marriage has fizzled out.
And do you need all three things to keep working?
Well, that would be wonderful, but it's unrealistic. Dopamine on the level that it's made and circulated in your body during that initial obsession phase only lasts, and this has been Helen Fisher of Rutgers, has done vast research that's been supported throughout the world. It only lasts 18 to 20 to 24 months. So it actually, you cannot sustain that level. The dopamine triggers the same area of the brain that's triggered on cocaine. Okay. So you can't keep up that level of excitement.
Okay. So we'll ask you in a moment what needs to be done to keep up that level of excitement in a general way. I'd just like to remind our listeners that we're talking to Nancy Perpall, and she is a nurse and a divorce attorney, and she's talking about helping a marriage to last. And we're talking about some of the ways to be careful about getting married and how you can keep that marriage going. And if you have to have a divorce, what is the easiest less toxic way to do it. Did you want to talk about those three things? And again, you're listening to Law Should Know on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, Long Island, New York. So what does a couple have to do to keep those three cylinders working? Or enough of them, yes.
Enough of them. The most important is communication. You really have to open those lines of communication. And when that starts to get stagnant, you really have to have the hard conversation and tell the person that you're married to that you miss them, you still desire them, and that you would like the relationship to renew itself.
And if there are communication problems or relationship problems, there are people out there who might be able to help with that. And it's important to try that, a therapist or something, before it gets too far gone.
Absolutely. And the internet is full of resources that are free resources. The YouTube is a great resource. You can Google it. They have fantastic resources on the internet for people to explore what you can do to regenerate and reignite that feeling of passion in a relationship.
But there also may be counselors or other mental health professionals who can help with deeper issues.
I'm a big proponent of counseling. I think counseling can really save a marriage if both parties are invested in having it saved.
What is something that people should ask their partner before they get engaged?
They should definitely ask their partner about and we already went over a few of them, their attitudes towards finance and spending. That is a huge one. They should ask their partner about what their feelings are about, holidays and spending the holidays with the in-laws. You have to often compromise. 1 year will go with the wife's in-laws or wife's family. The next year will go with the husband's family.
Or they may want to just do something on their own.
Pardon me?
No, the couple may just want to do something on their own.
Right,
without
exactly.
either of
That's what
those
I'm
groups.
saying.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you have to really make a decision of what is your expectation. If you don't ask the question, if one person is expecting to go to the in-laws on the holiday and the other one says, no, I really would like to spend it with you, that needs to be discussed before you get
And
married.
the compromise might be taking turns,
Correct.
Okay.
That's
and
right.
and you touched on it before, but why is the divorce rate increasing, especially as people get older, or maybe who are getting married for the first or second or third time as they get older?
The statistics for people over 50 are that there's there's an increase. There's twice as many people getting divorced at 60 because of the fact that when they got married, 60. When they got married, there was a stigma associated with divorce, and there's no longer a stigma. The other issue is that people are looking at their mortality and they're thinking that they're not happy in their relationship and they don't want to spend the rest of their life in a situation where they're not happy, and that's causing them stress.
And they're feeling that maybe they might do better divorced or with an opportunity to find a new relationship later in life.
Absolutely. And they can't see spending their retirement with the person that they spent the last 20 or 30 years with.
And what is one trait in a relationship that might predict divorce?
John Gottman, who is the greatest researcher on the issue of marriage and the potential for divorce, the biggest factor is contempt for the other person. When somebody is speaking, rolling the eyes, or making fun of them, and contempt generally is the biggest predictor of divorce in a relationship.
Do some people misread or overinterpret those signals?
They absolutely
maybe
do.
It's not intentional. It's just a person's style, and men and women may have different styles, and different people may have different styles.
And that's why, as I said, communication is absolutely the key, because you can't let that go. Because if you say nothing and you've misinterpreted and all you do is you swallow it down, it's going to come up, just like old Bessie at the at the fence. Well, she swallows her curd, it comes up.
And you talked about things that a couple should be on the same page about before they get married. What is the most common reason that people break an engagement? And is it better to break an engagement than have a divorce as a newlywed?
About 20% of people who get engaged do break an engagement, and it's basically on mistrust, miscommunication, and failure to disclose something that someone has found out about.
And what kind of things that occur during a marriage can also trigger that breach of trust?
Recently, there has been an uptick in what they call financial infidelity, where someone changes an insurance policy or a beneficiary of a benefit, an employee benefit, or regrettably, and it happens, explain to the spouse that they have to sign a deed. They have to release their interest in a piece of real estate for some reason that the person lies about. Taking money out of an account without disclosing it, giving money to a family member or someone else that the spouse would not have agreed to. Those are the types of things that are characterized as financial infidelity.
Is there some difference in what people might consider infidelity? Could there be just the jealousy? Let's say if a husband or wife has just a social relationship with maybe a longtime friend or a coworker or member of the opposite sex?
Oh, yes.
So
definitely.
what goes too far, or what limits could there be, or what reasonable limits?
What goes too far is when one of the spouses texts repeatedly, sends emails repeatedly, seems more concerned about that person than the person that they're married to.
And might share their life in just words or texts or emails with that other person rather than their spouse.
Absolutely. And that is the perception of the spouse has been left out of this.
So in that situation, should there be a little more tolerance and a little more balance, or should that third person in a relationship be cut off completely?
It really, it comes back down to communication. Sitting down with your spouse, whichever one it is that's having this emotional infidelity, which is what it's considered, when you're more interested in connecting with someone who you're not married to and who you've promised to love and who you've trusted your heart to, and you've trusted them not to break it, meant they're breaking it right now.
So the couple has to find where that line should be. It may not be breaking it, but just to provide some type of balance.
Absolutely.
I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking with Nancy Perpall, and she is a nurse who became a divorce lawyer, and we're talking about helping marriages to last. If there's physical infidelity, is that usually the end of a marriage, or can marriages can those kind of be prevented or overcome?
That's a very interesting question, and it's a very nuanced question, because many times I've represented people who come in and explain that it's been a one-night stand, and I highly encourage that. If it's not an emotional affair, if it's just someone had too much to drink, on a layover trip or whatever, I mean, that's really a whole different animal than someone who's had a long-term emotional infidelity with another person.
But also the reasons why that could happen on the part of both people, should also be explored so it can be learned from or prevented.
Usually emotional and physical infidelity is the death knell of a marriage. I really, in 34 years, I only saw one couple try to make a go of it, and then the individual came back for a divorce in the end.
Nancy, also, I know you're the author of a novel. Tell us about that.
I recently retired, and I've always wanted to write a story that would help people navigate a situation where they're about to get married, but they're having second thoughts, and their gut is telling them this is not the right thing to do. And the name of the novel, or the title rather, is Around Which All Things Bend. And love, of course, is the thing around which all things bend. We all have a certain amount of bend that we're going to do either to get love or give love until we break. And that's what the book is about. It's about this one protagonist who he couldn't bend any longer and broke. He broke the engagement before the wedding. And then he goes on to explore what it is about a relationship that you really need to understand. And what he comes to terms with is what I sincerely believe. And it's not about finding the right person in your life to have a lifelong relationship with. It's about being the right person in a relationship for it to work.
And how do you become that person?
You become that person by becoming self-aware of what your pitfalls are, what your weaknesses are. What is it that you're really looking for? Are you looking for a long-term relationship, or are you just looking for safety? So many people today, especially women who are in their 30s who want to have children, more and more are settling in relationships that their heart really isn't in it. So they're really not the right person for the relationship. And it's really not fair to enter into a relationship with someone just because you want a child. And it's not fair to the child either, because the chances of that relationship working are not very good.
And can a reader learn things about life and about their own perspective by reading your novel?
Absolutely. And I'm thrilled to say that that message apparently has been conveyed loud and clear given the reviews on Amazon. Almost every review references the psychology, the advice, the life lessons that are in this book buried in the story.
And you're saying it's good for people in a marriage to be flexible up to a point.
You have to be flexible in a marriage. I mean,
but it can't just be on one partner. It's got to be. There has to be a certain flexibility on both, and the flexibility has to complement each other.
Absolutely, without a question of a doubt.
And what information do you have about these issues, the divorce rate or marriage or happiness or your novel on your website?
It's been my passion since I retired to share a lot of the information that I've learned. I've really studied relationships. I've studied how they form, why they fail. And it's on my blog, which is Nancy, Nancy, Perpall, PERPALL.com. And I have, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 blogs, which go through a lot of different life cycles that a couple is going to go through. The birth of a child, struggles in the relationship and the like.
And you also talk about what will help to keep a relationship strong. It's not
Absolutely.
just the negative. It's things that can cause problems, perhaps ways to deal with them, but also things can help avoid problems or move around them or move beyond them.
Absolutely. The blogs all contain the resolution, the strategies, how you can turn the ship.
And what's your final piece of advice to people as they approach relationships, perhaps leading to marriage and hopefully not divorce?
I strongly recommend premarital counseling. I strongly recommend getting some professional insight into your personalities, what your goals are, what your strategies will be when there are going to be arguments. And there are going to be arguments in a marriage.
And that's to make sure that you're compatible or you have the strength or wisdom to work out those differences?
Absolutely.
And any other things that can be a sign of perhaps a marriage that's doomed before people, tie the knot?
Detachment is a big one. When you're in an argument, just withdrawing and detaching from the other person, that is very damaging. And it's a big, big red flag that your marriage is really headed towards the rocks.
And is it better for someone to look for ways to compromise rather than to badmouth or yell at that other person because they're not on the same page?
Absolutely. The yelling and the bad mouthing is really another type of rolling the eyes or contempt. And that is one of the big keys that leads to divorce, the contempt.
Because it's hard to compromise with that.
You can't really compromise with that. I mean, it's demeaning to the other person. It's not healthy for the other person.
It's not a constructive way to resolve problems.
Absolutely.
And that causes more stress for the person raising their voice than the person who's being yelled at?
Both.
And non-productive.
Totally non-productive.
Okay. I'd like to thank our guest, Nancy Perpall, and she's the author of Around Which All Things Bend. If you missed any portion of the program, you want to tell someone else about it, just go to the website for the podcast at nccradio.org. And please join us next week at this same time here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nebraska Community College in Garden City, New York, for another program on law you should know.